Hello, YouTubers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are looking at the corruption of faith, the spread of false doctrines, and the rise of political figures being defined as Messianic leaders. Religious institutions shape morality, belief, and collective identity. But what happens when those institutions no longer serve the truth? When faith is hijacked by ideology? When leaders are no longer questioned but worshipped? Megachurches explode in size, filling stadiums with followers who hang on every word. Political movements emerge with religious fervor, turning leaders into figures of divine authority. False knowledge spreads, rewriting scriptures to fit agendas, trapping minds in ideological echo chambers. The Messiah phenomenon mirrors patterns seen throughout history. Leaders elevated beyond critique, their actions justified through selective theology, their status reinforced by charismatic preachers and media empires. This isn't a new strategy. Religious movements throughout history have been used to control, to manipulate, to enforce obedience under the guise of spiritual truth. But how does this happen? How does false doctrine replace real faith? How do these megachurches reshape beliefs into political submission? To understand the forces at play, we need to break this down piece by piece. So let's start with the origins, where false knowledge takes root, how it spreads, and the signals that reveal its influence. False doctrines refer to teachings that deviate from core tenets of established religious faiths. These doctrines often prioritize personal gain, political agendas, or cultural preferences over the timeless spiritual principles meant to guide humanity. When disseminated through influential platforms like megachurches and corrupt pastors, these doctrines can lead to widespread spiritual confusion and a departure from authentic religious practices. One of the most notable examples of false doctrine is the prosperity gospel, which equates faith with material success. Prominent megachurch leaders such as Joel Osteen, Paula White, and Kenneth Copeland have faced criticism for promoting the idea that financial blessings and physical well-being are guaranteed rewards for strong faith and generous giving. This teaching not only shifts focus from communal service and humility, but also exploits vulnerable believers who donate money they often cannot afford in the hopes of receiving divine favor. Another growing false doctrine is dominion theology, which advocates for Christians to take control of secular institutions, often intertwining faith with political power. Leaders like Paula White, the lead spiritual advisor to Donald Trump, have been accused of using this doctrine to push political agendas under the guise of a spiritual mandate. This blending of politics and religion can compromise the integrity of faith and foster division among believers. As Christ said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's." False doctrines often pave the way for the idolization of religious or political leaders, placing them on a pedestal that blurs the line between human fallibility and divine perfection, believing they've been saved for a divine mandate. This idolatry can lead followers to accept teachings and actions uncritically, regardless of how they align with foundational religious principles. Megachurches, with their vast congregations and extensive media reach, wield significant influence over millions of believers. While many megachurches genuinely seek to uplift and guide their members, others have been criticized for spreading teachings that prioritize growth, wealth, and influence over spiritual integrity. In some cases, megachurch leaders become the focus of worship, rather than the faith they claim to represent. Charismatic pastors with celebrity-like status, such as Hillsong's Carl Lentz or Elevation Church's Stephen Furtick, have faced allegations of prioritizing personal fame over spiritual guidance. This cult of personality can shift the focus away from God and towards human leaders, leading to spiritual stagnation and disillusionment. Megachurches often have these significant resources, including broadcast networks, publishing deals, and social media platforms. While these tools can spread positive messages, they can also amplify false doctrines and misleading teachings, reaching a global audience with potentially harmful effects. A new ideology has emerged in recent years that has quite literally placed Donald Trump as the new Messiah of America. Shane Vaughn, his followers, and dozens more like him and their idolization of Donald Trump exemplifies how political figures can become intertwined with religious movements. Dubbed by some as a messianic figure, Trump has been portrayed as a divinely anointed leader chosen to save America from moral and spiritual decay. Other prominent evangelical leaders, such as Franklin Graham and Robert Jeffress, have referred to Trump as being chosen by God, likening his presidency to the biblical stories of King David or Cyrus the Great. This narrative has been reinforced through rhetoric and symbolism, such as Trump standing before religious symbols or being prayed over by evangelical leaders. This messianic portrayal has led some followers to view Trump not as a flawed political leader who's doing a decent job, but as a divine savior figure creating a dangerous confrontation of faith and politics. While MAGA Republicans have not, thankfully, fully embraced this dogma, some of the rhetoric permeates into the mainstream, even from Trump himself. The Make America Great Again movement has taken on some religious undertones, with rallies often resembling revivalist meetings. Chants, symbols, rituals associated with the MAGA movement echo religious practices, blurring the lines between political allegiance and spiritual devotion. So from that, we can see that it's easy for some on the extreme right. Trump represents not just a political leader, but a spiritual redeemer, perpetuating the spread of false knowledge that equates political ideology with divine will. This phenomenon fosters blind loyalty, discouraging critical thinking and open dialogue. Followers are often encouraged to dismiss opposing viewpoints as attacks on faith, further entrenching division and reinforcing the false narrative of Trump as a messianic figure. While false doctrines and religious manipulation have clear impacts on faith communities, the spread of false knowledge is not confined to the realm of religion. In today's world, almost anything can become a distraction that pulls individuals away from their purpose and alignment with their journey. Whether it's UFOs, conspiracy theories, political agendas, obsessive sports fandom, infamous pop star followings, the Swiffer wet jets if you catch my drift, or entertainment cycles. Distractions can captivate attention and create cognitive dissonance. When this happens, it prevents individuals from recognizing the deeper truths that they are meant to uncover. Distractions manifest in various forms, often disguised as harmless hobbies, entertainment, or intellectual pursuits. Yet when those distractions monopolize attention and energy, they act as barriers to personal growth and collective advancement. For more information about foreign distractions and how advanced nations would use their technology to weaponize these tactics, check out my previous video, Quantum Consciousness, Time Loops, and Geopolitical Reality. I cover how all these tie into what they signal in the grand scheme of things because it is in no way limited to one social power structure. Movements like QAnon exemplify how conspiracy theories can be all-encompassing distractions. While many people turn to conspiracies out of a genuine desire to make sense of chaos, these theories often exploit fear and uncertainty. The cognitive dissonance they create, believing in contradictory ideas simultaneously, leads to mental exhaustion, mistrust, and division, preventing individuals from engaging in meaningful self-discovery or critical thinking. Obsessions with extraterrestrial phenomena, while intriguing, can similarly divert attention. When curiosity about the unknown becomes an all-consuming fixation, it can distract from immediate earthly concerns, relationships, and spiritual pursuits. This isn't to dismiss the pursuit of scientific understanding, but to caution against using such topics as a means of escapism. While sports and entertainment can provide healthy outlets for stress and community building, their dominance in culture often distracts from personal and collective growth. When these industries monopolize your time, your energy, your resources, they become societal opiums, keeping people disengaged from their higher purpose. We saw this in Roman times as well when their republic was collapsing. They would have bread and circuses to keep the people under control. Much like religious idolatry, political tribalism creates echo chambers that perpetuate false narratives and prevent individuals from engaging with opposing perspectives. It fosters division, entrenching people in cycles of anger, fear, and cognitive dissonance. Our own inner turmoil, especially when never addressed, perpetuates another mental distraction. Cognitive dissonance occurs when individuals are faced with contradictory beliefs, values, or information. While occasional dissonance can drive critical thinking, chronic exposure to conflicting messages, whether through politics, media, or conspiracy theories, leads to confusion, anxiety, and mental fatigue. This state of unrest keeps people stuck in cycles of distraction, unable to focus on deeper truths of their lives. For example, the constant cycle of news and misinformation surrounding conspiracy theories like QAnon creates an environment of perpetual tension. Followers are drawn into a loop of fear and anticipation, waiting for prophecies to come true, which keeps them from addressing more immediate and actionable aspects of their lives. Similarly, obsessions with entertainment, from celebrity culture to sports rivalries, divert energy that could be spent on personal development, spiritual exploration, or meaningful relationships. Too long didn't listen is take a break and touch grass occasionally. It's okay. The chaos will be there when you get back. Humans are inherently social creatures, biologically wired to thrive on connection, cooperation, and division, whether it stems from politics, religion, or cultural distraction, erodes these fundamental needs, leading to stagnation in cognitive and emotional development. From an evolutionary perspective, humans survived and thrived through cooperation and shared purpose. The human brain developed to value social bonds, empathy, and mutual understanding. Neurochemical responses, like the release of oxytocin during positive social interactions, reinforce these connections, fostering a sense of belonging and well-being. And that's why so many people are upset about all of the mask mandates. We lost so many years of facial and social interaction and being able to read and perceive those cues. When division takes hold through false knowledge, political polarization, or media manipulation, it disrupts these neurochemical processes. Instead of fostering unity, division activates the brain's stress responses, such as the release of cortisol, which can impair memory, reduce empathy, and inhibit critical thinking. What are some more long-term effects of division? We can experience stunted cognitive growth. Division limits exposure to diverse ideas and perspectives. And I don't mean diverse like DEI diverse, I just mean different diverse, leading to intellectual stagnation. Without engaging in differing viewpoints, individuals miss opportunities for growth, innovation, and the development of complex problem-solving skills. We can also experience emotional isolation. Persistent division creates feelings of loneliness and alienation, which are detrimental to mental health. Studies have shown that social isolation can lead to depression, anxiety, and even physical health issues such as heart disease. We also experience dehumanization of the other. Division fosters an us versus them mentality, making it easier to dehumanize those with differing beliefs. This not only perpetuates conflict, but it also reduces empathy and compassion, which are essential for cognitive and emotional development. Long-term effects of division can also cause a disruption of collective progress. A divided society struggles to address larger issues like political dissension, poverty, and inequality. The energy spent on conflicts and distractions could instead be channeled into solving these pressing challenges. Distractions, whether they stem from false doctrines or cultural obsessions, amplify division by keeping individuals disengaged from meaningful dialogue and self-reflection. When people are consumed by entertainment, conspiracies, or political propaganda, they are less likely to seek common ground or recognize their shared humanity. To combat the enslaving effects of false knowledge and division, individuals must prioritize intentional living and purposeful engagement. Here are some things to consider. Cultivate some self-awareness. Reflect on the distractions in your life and evaluate whether they align with your personal growth and purpose. Reflect on the distractions in your life and evaluate whether they align with your personal growth and God's purpose for your life. Ask yourself whether these pursuits bring clarity or confusion. Secondly, seek truth actively. Engage with many sources of information. Question assumptions and remain open to new perspectives. Avoid echo chambers and seek out conversations that challenge your beliefs. Thirdly, foster connection. Prioritize relationships and communities that encourage growth, empathy, and mutual understanding. Build bridges rather than walls, and focus on shared goals rather than differences. Another beneficial tactic is to embrace stillness. In a world of constant noise, make time for quiet reflection and mindfulness. This practice can help you reconnect with your purpose and recognize the deeper truths God's trying to show you in your life. And lastly, resist manipulation. Be mindful of how media, politics, and cultural phenomena influence your thoughts and behaviors. Stay grounded in your values and know your purpose, rather than being swayed by external pressures. The spread of false doctrines and the deification of political figures have profound implications for individuals, communities, and societies at large. False knowledge traps believers in a cycle of misinformation and misplaced priorities, diverting them from genuine spiritual growth and understanding. When faith is tied to false doctrines or political agendas, believers may abandon critical thinking in favor of unquestioning loyalty, making them vulnerable to manipulation. When faith is tied to false doctrines or political agendas, believers may abandon critical thinking in favor of unquestioning loyalty, making them vulnerable to manipulation. One thing that we don't want to fall into is the trap that fosters an us versus them mentality. It's going to deepen divisions within our communities and society as a whole. When religious institutions prioritize wealth, power, and political influence over God's will and God's flock, they risk losing their moral and spiritual authority. False knowledge spreads through megachurches, political deification, and ideological faith movements, shaping individual perception and collective reality. When belief is tied to power structures and authority figures, spiritual understanding shifts into narratives designed to direct thought and behavior. However, these systems emerge within larger historical cycles, following patterns of expansion, stagnation, and collapse. Earlier civilizations encoded knowledge in myth, ritual, and architecture, leaving behind frameworks that influence the trajectory of human cognition. This series explores the beginnings of those loops, the moments in history where consciousness expanded, where perception of time, energy, and self-awareness shifted. The cycle playing out now follows the same structure, but in reverse. Distorted knowledge, once used to guide, now functions as a tool of confinement. However, every system built on restrictive thought reaches a point where it can no longer sustain itself. Additionally, false doctrines sustain themselves by limiting how people engage with reality. Faith becomes submission, ideology replaces exploration, and truth is reduced to what reinforces the system. Power depends on maintaining these constraints, using repetitive information loops to keep societies fixed within a controlled framework. However, history demonstrates that these loops do not continue indefinitely. When the foundation of a belief structure weakens, the collapse is inevitable. Every cycle reaches a point where this transition is unavoidable. The collapse of false knowledge does not erase the past, it forces adaptation. What follows depends on how people respond when given the opportunity to think beyond inherited narratives. Additionally, awareness alone does not break the cycle. Spiritual integrity requires engagement, the ability to recognize distortion, and the willingness to question narratives designed to direct thought. Breaking this pattern does not require rejecting everything that came before it. It requires engaging with belief in a way that's independent, conscious, and aligned with a broader understanding of existence. The transition away from false knowledge is already happening. What comes next is shaped by those who choose to recognize the shift and act accordingly. The patterns of history reveal the loops that shape civilization, consciousness, and beliefs. In my other series, we explore the beginnings of these loops, how ancient knowledge, materials, and early cognitive shifts set humanity on its current trajectory. Here, we examine the ends of those loops, the systems that rise, stagnate, and collapse as new cycles emerge, understanding that these patterns are not only a part of the process, understanding these patterns are only a small part of the process. Enduring to the end requires awareness, preparation, and the ability to navigate the transition as these structures break down. If you found these discussions valuable, like, subscribe, and ring that bell like the winner's lights you are for more content exploring history, physics, and consciousness through the lens of cyclical time. Future episodes will cover methods for recognizing these patterns, tools for maintaining clarity in a collapsing system, and ways to align with the next stage of human awareness. Thanks.